While the world's attention has been fixed on the escalating military confrontation in the Gulf of Oman, another critical front in the global struggle for peace and accountability has been quietly intensifying thousands of miles away in the corridors of Washington, Brussels, and the war-torn cities of Ukraine. At the center of this battle is not a missile, not a warship, not a drone. It is something far more fundamental, and in many ways, far more powerful. It is oil, and the money it generates, and the war it is paying for. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky did not mince words. In a series of pointed and passionate statements delivered on social media and through official channels, Zelensky publicly condemned the decision by the United States under the administration of President Donald Trump to extend the sanctions waiver on Russian oil exports for an additional month. The waiver, granted by the U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control on April 17th and valid through May 16th, allows Russian oil shipments to continue flowing to international markets, despite the broader sanctions framework that was designed to cut off Moscow's ability to fund its war in Ukraine. For Zelensky, the decision was not merely a policy disagreement. It was a moral failure. He called it an insult, a direct insult to the lives of the Ukrainian people. He argued that every dollar earned through the sale of Russian oil is a dollar deposited directly into the machinery of war. Every barrel that leaves a Russian port and reaches an international buyer is another barrel's worth of funding for the missiles, the bombs, the drones, and the military campaigns that are killing Ukrainian civilians every single day. Every dollar spent on Russian oil, Zelensky wrote, is money for war. He warned that extending the sanctions waiver did not reflect the reality of what is happening on the ground in Ukraine. It did not reflect the reality of the diplomatic situation. What it did, he argued, was something far more dangerous. It reinforced the belief within the Russian leadership that the world will continue to accommodate them, that the West will continue to look the other way, and that the war, therefore, can continue indefinitely. The financial data behind Zelensky's condemnation is staggering and impossible to ignore. According to figures from the International Energy Agency, Russia's revenues from crude oil and refined product exports reached $19 billion in March alone. That is nearly double the $9.3 billion recorded just 1 month earlier in February. The dramatic surge in revenue came as global energy prices spiked, driven in significant part by Iran's closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which pushed oil prices above $100 per barrel on multiple days throughout the month. In other words, the very military conflict unfolding in the Gulf of Oman, the same conflict that has disrupted global shipping and sent energy markets into turmoil, has handed Russia a financial windfall that is directly subsidizing its continued assault on Ukraine. At sea, the evidence of Russia's oil operation is visible and vast. More than 110 vessels from what analysts have dubbed Russia's so-called shadow fleet ships operating with deliberately obscured ownership structures, questionable insurance arrangements, and limited transparency are currently at sea, carrying an estimated 12 million barrels of Russian oil, valued at approximately $10 billion. These ships move quietly through international waters, exploiting legal gray areas and jurisdictional gaps to keep Russian energy flowing to willing buyers around the world. Zelensky confirmed that at least 100 Russian vessels are entering the Black Sea to transport oil, though he noted that doing so is not without risk. Ukrainian missiles and drone systems actively target Russian shipping in the Black Sea, and vessels transiting those waters do so under the constant threat of attack. Unable to stop Russian oil revenues through diplomacy alone, Ukraine has taken matters into its own hands, striking directly at the infrastructure that makes those revenues possible. In recent weeks, Ukrainian armed forces have conducted a series of bold and strategically calculated strikes deep inside Russian territory, targeting oil fields, refineries, drone manufacturing facilities, and critical transport infrastructure that supports Russia's energy export network. In one of the most significant recent operations, Ukrainian forces struck the Sami Fanglong refinery located in the Caspian Sea region, approximately 1,000 kilometers from the front line. The reach of that strike sent a clear message. Ukraine's ability to project force deep into Russian territory is expanding, and no piece of Russian energy infrastructure is beyond reach. In a separate operation, Ukrainian forces deployed domestically produced Vostok missiles to target a key strategic installation near the Russian-held port of Petersburg. The Ukrainian military confirmed the strike, describing the target as a drone manufacturing facility responsible for producing multiple types of unmanned aerial systems used against Ukrainian cities and civilians. The statement from the armed forces was direct and unapologetic. The operation was designed to reduce Russia's drone production capacity, protect Ukrainian civilians, and impose a tangible cost on Moscow for every attack it launches. Russia's defense ministry did not formally acknowledge the strikes. Instead, officials stated only that air defense systems had intercepted 250 drones overnight, a figure that, in itself, speaks to the extraordinary scale and frequency of the aerial warfare now being conducted across this conflict. Meanwhile, a fire was reported at a warehouse facility in the city of Koryo, with regional governor Alexander Demchenko confirming that a drone strike had ignited a blaze in the area. Emergency services responded and brought the fire under control. The Russian government offered no further detail on the damage sustained, according to reporting by the New York Times. The cumulative effect of Ukraine's strikes on Russian oil infrastructure has reduced Russian oil production and export capacity by an estimated 80,000 barrels per day, representing a reduction of approximately 13%. Analysts estimate that these operations are costing Russian President Vladimir Putin in the range of $100 million per day in lost energy revenue. It is a meaningful blow, but it has not been enough. The extension of the U.S. sanctions waiver was not announced publicly by the Secretary of State, emerged through back channels, and was confirmed only after the fact. The waiver adds an additional 100 million barrels of authorized Russian oil shipments on top of the 100 million barrels already covered by the previous agreement, a doubling of the exemption that Ukrainian officials described as deeply troubling. The U.S. State Department offered a carefully worded justification for the extension. A department spokesperson acknowledged the ongoing pressure on global oil prices caused by the military conflict involving Iran and Israel, stating that while diplomatic negotiations continue to accelerate, Washington also wants to ensure that sufficient oil supplies remain available to countries that depend on them. The implication was clear. The administration is balancing its commitment to sanctions pressure against its concern about energy price stability in an already volatile global market. Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Osini, pushed back forcefully. In direct communications with Washington, she called on the U.S. government to maintain and strengthen sanctions on Moscow, arguing that doing so was not just a matter of solidarity with Ukraine, but a matter of American national interest. The funds Russia is using to attack Ukraine, she argued, are the same funds it uses to support its allies and proxies around the world. Limiting those funds is not charity, it is strategy. Across the Atlantic, the European Union finds itself in a similarly complicated position, caught between its stated commitment to isolating Russia economically and the practical realities of energy dependency and price volatility. Measures proposed in January aim to ban EU-based companies from providing shipping services, including insurance, logistics, and financial support to any vessels carrying Russian oil products. The proposals also called for a complete halt to Russian oil imports into the European Union by the end of 2027. But those measures have stalled. The sudden and dramatic surge in global energy prices triggered by Iran's closure of the Strait of Hormuz has made EU member states increasingly reluctant to impose additional restrictions on Russian energy at precisely the moment when the case for doing so is strongest. The result is a deeply uncomfortable paradox. The same crisis in the Gulf of Oman that has morally strengthened the argument for squeezing Russia financially has simultaneously weakened the political will to do so. Russia, for its part, has not been passive. Moscow has been actively working to insulate its energy sector from Western sanctions, investing in domestic oil infrastructure, cultivating alternative buyers across Asia and the Middle East, and expanding the shadow fleet that allows it to move oil beyond the reach of Western oversight. while governments debate waivers and market stability, the people of Ukraine are living and dying with the consequences of every policy decision made in Washington and Brussels. Over the past week alone, Russia launched more than 2,360 bombs, missiles, and drones at Ukrainian territory. The attacks have been relentless, targeted, and increasingly deadly. On the night of April 19th, a strike on the city of Chernihiv killed a 16-year-old boy and wounded 4 others. In the southern city of Kherson, a Russian drone struck a taxi, killing the man inside. In Chmelnytsky, a drone attack knocked out the city's electricity entirely, leaving residents without power in the aftermath of the strike. Both Kherson and Khmelnytsky are now without electricity. Their infrastructure systematically dismantled by a campaign designed not just to destroy military targets, but to break civilian morale and render daily life unlivable. These are not statistics. These are people, a 16-year-old boy who will never see another morning, a man in a taxi who never made it home, families sitting in the dark in cities that were once alive with light. Zelensky responded to each of these attacks with the same message. Delivered with the same unflinching clarity: the Russian tankers must be stopped. The oil must stop flowing. The money must stop reaching Moscow. Because every barrel of oil that reaches an international buyer, every dollar that flows into the Russian treasury, is converted directly and without ambiguity into the weapons being dropped on Ukrainian cities. What is unfolding across these interconnected crises in the Gulf of Oman, in the skies above Ukraine, in the corridors of the US Treasury and the European Commission, is something far larger than any single military confrontation or policy decision. It is a test of whether the international community's commitment to accountability, to sovereignty, to the basic principle that aggression must have consequences is real, or whether it is conditional, whether it bends under the pressure of energy prices and economic convenience and the complex arithmetic of geopolitical. Ukraine is fighting a war on 2 fronts. One front is the battlefield, where its soldiers face Russian forces daily. The other front is the diplomatic and economic arena, where it must convince its allies again and again and again that the cost of compromising on Russian sanctions is ultimately higher than the cost of holding firm. Zelensky's message to the world has not changed. It will not change. Stop the ships. Stop the oil. Stop the money, because as long as Russia can sell its oil, it can fund its war. And as long as it can fund its war, Ukrainian children will continue to die in the dark.